Fab. Well, thank you very much, Adam. Let me introduce myself. I'm the Environmental and Sustainability Manager with Yorkshire Ambulance Service, and I'm going to give you a bit of an introduction into travel disruption impact that we've got and how we can build resilience. It's not just about what we've been looking at within the ambulance service, but across the whole of the country. There's a lot of really exciting stuff that's going on that is tech-based, but also stuff that we need to seriously start thinking about on a different angle and a different direction. So travel is, if you don't know about the carbon footprint of various different things, we need to move from what we're doing at the moment to a net zero by 2050. And in order to do that, we need to basically eliminate or offset a lot of the emissions that we've got. So looking at travel itself, it contributes about 30% of the world's emissions. And it's not just a case of us driving backwards and forwards, it's a case of us also shipping our food around the world. It's the trucks that we use to transport food, to transport IT, but also to transport rubbish that we want to buy and the plastic stuff that we buy from faraway countries. What we need to start looking at is looking at how we can start to disrupt this transport emissions, but also start to drive down what we're actually using and how we can create a circular economy with that. But also at the same time, we can start to provide resilience with that. So the technologies that we've, and for in many cases, many people are just starting to use literally in the past 4 or 5 weeks, that have started to massively disrupt transport itself. In the past 5 weeks, emissions across the planet have dropped by 5%. And a lot of this is actually down to transport. Aviation has completely stopped, and we've got a massive issue with, there's been, as you can see from all the COVID conversations that have been going over the past few weeks, we've dropped the amount of travel by car by over, I think it's 70%. So essentially we've got a lot of technologies that have suddenly come to the fore because people can't physically transport themselves anymore. So over the past 5 weeks, Zoom had a 1,500% increase in the amount of people downloading it. Microsoft Teams suddenly came into the fore through the NHS, and Skype and WhatsApp are complete disruptors to the transport industry. Apps like these various technologies, Uber has disrupted a lot of the ride-hailing aspects. Now, the resilience that comes from looking at something like this is actually how we change the dynamics of travel. So Faxi, which is an app which you can use to encourage people to car share, actually enables up to 5 or 6 people to get into a vehicle alongside of lift share. These ride-hailing apps are already starting to disrupt and provide a lot of resilience for what we actually do on quite regularly. But these apps need to kind of be developed in order to look at how we can start to provide resilience to the food industry, to be looking at how we can transport things around the planet. Car clubs are also having a major impact on the transport aspect. So you actually don't need to own a vehicle, and you can actually hire a vehicle for when you want. When you think about the amount of time that vehicles are actually just on the road, sitting there waiting. Car clubs themselves actually have a dramatic increase in London. They've actually increased the number of people that have got rid of their cars, and they're pay as you go. They're located in town, so in fact you don't need to drive anywhere around the country, because many of them have, like Enterprise, have transport that's located alongside of stations, so you can hire them when you get out of a train station. And it's actually start to reduce car traffic, and many 18-year-olds are not learning how to drive, or they're not owning a vehicle, so they're actually looking at options on car clubs and disrupting the way that we travel. Public transport's had a bit of a revolution over the past few years. Now, this is provided an alternative to technologies that have actually enabled us to look at how we can move around. So The technology that goes with public transport is we're looking at Oyster cards in London and around in and around Leeds. We've got basically you can use your own bank card just to swipe in. So the contactless aspect has had a dramatic increase and beneficial aspects through COVID as well. But the mobility aspect has enabled us through schemes like bike hires and the Boris bikes in London, with other aspects of having line bikes and having apps that enable you to know when and how transport is arriving, when it'll be arriving for you as well. The resilience that goes with this needs to be developed, but I think there's a lot of potential on this. Now, if you actually do need to travel, the technology is dramatically changing very quickly, and there's been a 35% increase in the amount of electric vehicles that have started being sold since COVID kicked in, because people are realizing that they need to think differently about this, about the way that we move around. So electric vehicles, hydrogen technology, but also battery storage is providing a real resilience to something that we need to eliminate, which is basically diesel and aviation aspects. So the electric market has dramatically increased. We've also got hydrogen market, which in Yorkshire, unfortunately, we've only got one hydrogen fueling station, and this is the one down in Sheffield. But the two technologies, if they're sourced from green energy, would be resilient in a dystopian-esque type of future, because both can be generated from solar or wind and offshore wind as well. Now, battery storage becomes a big part of the transport disruption aspect, because both of those, if you're relying on solar, it's during the day. If you're relying on wind, it's when the wind's blowing. But battery storage becomes a critical element of the resilience for all of the technologies, including IT itself. So being able to store energy for distribution when you actually need it is a really critical part of our transport of the future. But also we've got another technology which is kind of coming on, is how to charge through a wireless charging system. So EV charging is having stuff embedded in the ground. So those that live in high-rise buildings could actually park and have wireless charging without having swipe cards. So you just need a swipe card in order to access your vehicle being charged. So, oops. Sorry, everybody. The next level of technology that is coming with vehicle travel is having large solar charging locations. So this is the first one that will be open in Braintree down in Essex, and this is a grid serve location, and they will have the capability of charging 24 vehicles to be charged within half an hour. This technology is now, and in the next year to 2 years, Grid Serve are looking to roll out over 100 charging systems, which will be completely solar powered and will be completely resilient to the technology. They'll have mass battery storage as well on site. So travel itself will become very green very quickly. There's set to be another 4 that will be built. The nearest one in Yorkshire will be Easingwold, and there'll be one in Hull that's set to be built, and then there'll be a few around Huddersfield as well. Autonomous vehicles are going to play a massive role in the future. So this is a Tesla, and if you've had a privilege of driving a Tesla, you can actually see the potential with autonomous vehicles to basically eliminate the need for any requirement to own a vehicles. And having the autonomy within your vehicle itself will have the capability to eliminate up to 60% of the tailpipe emissions, reduce fuel, but also reduce accidents as well. But also the ownership of vehicles will be eliminated. Deliveries and last mile deliveries are going to become a critical part of this. And if you've had the joy of being self-isolated, you actually understand the importance that we've put on a delivery systems. There's a troop of these Starship Troopers as such that have been dispatched through Ocado and Sainsbury's to deliver food around the area. But also, we need to consider that technology is not the be-all and end-all and dystopian future that we're looking at. And essentially, we need to start looking at how we can use human power to transport things. So last mile deliveries and last mile movements of things are going to become a really critical part, especially with centre of towns and clean air zones being introduced as well. Online shopping is having a dramatic increase in the amount of traffic, but at the same time, it can actually reduce the amount of people travelling backwards and forwards to the stores. But it's also, the counter aspect is that we're having an increase in the amount of aviation transport for products around the planet. But we need to start looking at, as this is a solution, do we move away from having high street stores? But also, is this something that we need to start looking at for a transport solution? Telehealth has a major role to play in the UK. About 7% of the UK's traffic is NHS related, and that's people moving to and from work, transporting patients around, ambulances, nurses, out of hours, doctors, but also supplies and patients moving around for appointments as well. There's about an £18 billion ticking time bomb waiting with air pollution quality issues that we've got at the moment that are related to air pollution impacting the amount of people that are set to have respiratory problems. So we've got a big issue that we need to deal with now, but I think there's a role that IT and technology can play in the future as we move forwards. But one of the critical aspects we need to start thinking about is stopping buying from abroad, and the resilience that we have has been shown through the COVID issues. If you buy local, you have everything sourced locally, which means that we can become more resilient to dealing with that. But it also means that our supply chain is there, it's set up. If you're buying from abroad, i.e. face masks and things like that, you've got a big problem because everybody else also is looking for that resource. So we need to start looking at what we need to do to remove the need for travel. So having people not traveling, VoIP, Zoom, it's having a direct impact already. Reducing the need to travel with bulk procurements, telehealth, last mile delivery is also something that we need to start building as part of our resilience for the future. And also having green technologies implemented for travel will play a role in that where it's required. But we also need to stop buying rubbish manufactured in the Far East. It reduces the travel, reduces the waste, but also buying local ensures that we support our local requirements and our local suppliers. Thank you very much. I saw a few Q&As that popped up. So solutions, e.g. bike rental, are all good, but we need corresponding set of encouragement factors, e.g. legislation incentives to use better solutions and penalising to stay on the old solutions. Very much agree. We've got a big challenge on this, and I think with the advent of the Petersburg climate dialogue that's happened this week, we've definitely got a change and a challenge that will be coming through this, and I think the systems will start to change. The EU has got a massive change system that they've got with their new Green Deal, so a lot of these things will come through legislation. When you say travel will be more green when charged by solar, does that include the environmental costs of batteries? Yes, it will be. There's the Faraday challenge that's happening down in the Midlands, and they are changing the way that we're sourcing batteries. So at the moment, a lot of the true everybody's battery ideas is through lithium, which is obviously from a not very good resource over in South America, but there's going to be a high demand for lithium, so there'll be a change in the way that batteries are made, manufactured, and also recycled. So that's a critical part of going forwards. See private vehicle ownership as part of the possible resilient transport future? No, I think we're moving towards a sphere that people won't own vehicles, or will own one vehicle, or possibly only rent. Is there enough lithium to provide EVs at scale? No, and that's going to be one of the big challenges as well. But there are, as I was saying, the Faraday challenge is looking at things like rhubarb, various acids, seawater, and also looking at things like carbon-based batteries as well. Flood disruption as part of business continuity for patient safety. Yes, we're looking at how we can deal with that, and we've suffered quite a few issues with flood disruption this past year as well. It's been a challenge, and it's something that climate change is not going to go away in that. Buying less rubbish, great in theory, but how do you sell that idea to the public? A very good point. I think probably a lot of the programs have been highlighted through Amazon's sourcing and various plastics has played a major role in, I think, a lot of people challenging and looking at what they buy and the resilience of things. So I will pass on to Anne-Marie. Thank you very much for all your questions. Let me pass over, and thank you very much for having me.